Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, and welcome back to Responses to Critics, Suhaib Webb Part 3 on Quranist Network Television, QNet TV. Today we will begin with minute 6.40, where Mr. Webb mentions a person who comes to him and says, "Oh Imam, I want an answer to this question, but I only want it from the Quran." So, I mean, Mr. Webb was not happy about this. He said, well, you know, the Quran, the Sunnah and the opinions of the ulama all matter, and the Quran and Sunnah, they are wahi, or inspiration, revelation, if you like. So, we now need to ask, who is in the right here? That person who asked Mr. Webb, or Mr. Webb himself? Well, if you look at chapter 5, verse 101, it says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O ye who have believed, La tas'alu an ashya'an, do not ask about things, in tubda lakum tasu'ukum, which if made clear or apparent to you, will trouble you. Now here's the key part. Wa in tas'alu anha, and if you ask about them, hina yunazzalu al-Qur'an, when the Quran is being revealed, tubda lakum, they will be made clear to you. So that person was actually right by saying, I want the answer only from the Quran. Well, any answer beyond that is mere opinion, because only the Quran, in this ayah, it shows only the Quran is being phrased as the answer to our questions. So Mr. Webb also implies there that the Sunnah, or the actions and the sayings of the Prophet, are also wahi. This contradicts a particular aspect of the Quran. For example, chapter 9, verse 43, which says, Afa Allahu anka, Allah forgive you. Lima avinta lahum, why did you give them permission? Hatta yatabayyana laka, until given to you, until made clear to you, sorry, alladhina sadaqu wa ta'lama al-kadhibin, those who have been truthful, and you know those who are liars, the liars. Yeah. So here Allah had to forgive the messenger for making an error in judgment. Let's think about this for a minute. If the messenger was inspired by Allah at all times, then who inspired him to make that error in the first place? Well, Allah would be the one to inspire him. That being the case, should Allah then need to forgive him? After all, it's Allah who made him do it. No, obviously not. So here we have a contradiction. That's not the only one. Let's go to chapter 66, verse 1. Ya ayyuhan nabi, O Prophet, lima tuharrimu ma ahallallahu laka tabtaghi mardata azwajika wallahu ghafurur rahim. Why did you make haram what Allah made halal for you, seeking the goodwill of your spouses? Allah is forgiving and merciful. So here, Rasulullah made haram what Allah made halal for him. He made a mistake. Did Allah guide him to do this? Allah inspire him, gave him wahi to do this? Obviously not. Why is Allah actually asking him, why are you doing this? So here, once again, we have to see that Rasulullah was not inspired at all times. If you look at the word wahi, again and again, we will see Rasulullah say, "Inna tabi' illa ma yuha ilayya." Verily, I follow nothing except what is revealed to me. He follows the Quran. He only follows the Quran. Apart from that, he is a human being like us, and he has made errors, as you can see, and Allah has corrected him. Right, we now move to minute 7.15, so minute 7.15 of Mr. Webb's video, and here he actually asks the audience to have their own definition of the Quran. MashaAllah, I think this is a marvelous exercise. I tried this myself. I asked myself, what does the Quran mean to me? I mean, and the answers I got for myself, it helped me clarify the role of the Quran in my life. So mashallah, this is a fantastic exercise. I recommend everyone to try this. Thank you very much, Mr. Webb, for recommending this exercise for us. Right, we now move on to minute 7.45, where Mr. Webb describes his experience abroad, where he was reading the YaSin. And what happened was, people saw him reading the YaSin, and they thought someone had died. I mean, this is pretty normal custom, really. I mean, it's not uncommon, at least in Southeast Asian countries, to see when someone dies, you read the YaSin for them. But Mr. Webb is rather bemused by this fact because he feels that why is it so abnormal for a person to read the Quran and people think someone has died? Well, I have an answer to that, and the answer is the Quran has been made inaccessible to Muslims. Now, I don't mean that materials regarding Quranic education has been made inaccessible. That's incorrect. Traditionalist Muslims have done a wonderful job with making the Quran accessible. However, there is still this mindset which says that you cannot contemplate the Quran on its own, because if you do so, you will be guided by shaitan. You know, and I think this is the strange thing about it. You know, it's like you want people to read the Quran, but at the same time, you give them a warning. Okay, well, you know what? If you read it and you're not under the guidance of a sheikh or something, basically you can be led astray. This is incorrect. Allah says in chapter 29, verse 69, whoever strives in us, in Allah, we will guide him to our paths. So there is absolutely no doubt about it. If you struggle to try to understand the Quran and you are sincere, Allah will guide you. And another point to be made is reading the YaSin. Reading the YaSin, there is apparently a difference of opinion among the traditionalists. It is the irony is that people thought, you know, Mr. Webb was reading the Quran and people thought that someone had died. The reason for this is given on this website, which you will see on screen, that reading YaSin for the dead is beneficial for them, for the dead person. There is again absolutely no evidence at all in the Quran for this, but the strange thing is in YaSin it actually says in ayat 70, liyunzira, to warn, that it warns. It's talking about the Quran now, yeah. Liyunzira man kana hayyan, those who are alive. Whether you take this metaphorically or literally, it's talking to those who are alive. Those who are dead, it has really no use for them anymore. They don't have any more use for it, sorry. So that's unfortunately the state of the matter. We are actually reciting Quran for dead people when we should be using it ourselves. Right, we now move on to minute 9.20, where Mr. Webb talks about reading the Quran on a daily basis. Again, mashallah, you can't argue with that. As people who believe in the Quran, we should read it, try to draw spiritual inspiration from it and act upon it. Mashallah, fantastic. One small comment though, Mr. Webb talks about reading a hizb of the Quran, and he says a hizb is half of a juz. A juz is generally, the Quran is divided into 30 ajza, 30 juzes, and a hizb is half a juz, so there will be 60 hizbs or 60 ahzabs in the Quran. And he says it's good to read a hizb. I have no problem with that as far as it doesn't contradict the Quran itself, but the Quran does give a suggestion as to how much of it we should read, and that is in chapter 17 verse 106, which says wa Qur'anan, and the Quran, faraknahu, we have divided, litakrahu ala nath ala mukthid, that you may recite on the people over time. وَنَزَّلْنَهُ تَنزِيلًا, and we descend it in a descent. So فَرَقْنَهُ, we divided it. Who is the we here? Obviously it's Allah, and it is Allah who divided the Quran. So therefore I would say that each Bismillah, because as you know Bismillah means in the name of Allah, so Faraknahu, it's Allah who divided, Bismillah, in the name of Allah. So if you look at each Basmala, each Bismillah, it acts as a divider in the Quran. So if you read from Bismillah to Bismillah, then you are getting the full message in that particular section. So if you don't have time, perhaps you can read the last chapters, get a little bit from there, and if you have time, read the entirety of chapter 2 or chapter 3, which are rather long. Maybe requires about an hour of your time to finish. You see, so that's my comment on that particular section, and I think that brings us to the end of responses to critics, Suhaib Webb part 3. We hope to continue with part 4, and I think it'll continue perhaps even up to part 6. So thank you very much for following this series, and thanks for listening. Bye.